Hi everyone, Lou Burrows here and welcome back to the show. Before we dive into today's episode, I would just love to share with you that this episode and this podcast is brought to you by Riverside. And like quite literally, I use Riverside to connect with guests and record podcast episodes that I bring to you every single week. I love Riverside for so many different reasons, including their community, which is available on Discord and Facebook. Their suite of AI tools, including AI show notes, magic clips, and how easy it is to use the platform. If you are a podcaster, creator, I would highly recommend getting onto Riverside and using the platform to record all of your content using the platform. To get started today, all you need to do is click on the link in the show notes of this episode and use code Luke Burrows, that's code Luke Burrows, my name, easy to remember, for 15% off your subscription. I would just also like to say thank you to Riverside for providing me with this discount for you guys, as I know it's going to help a lot of you to get on the platform and start to see the amazing benefits and transformation that using Riverside will have for all of your content creation. Let's get started creating with Riverside. Now, moving on to today's episode. In this episode, we are joined by Kat Chiu, who is a spiritual transformational guide, and we discuss purpose, spirituality, suffering, and Chinese medicine. If you want to learn if suffering is part of the human experience, what it actually means to live with purpose, Kat's definition of spirituality, the background of Chinese medicine, and how it can be applied to our modern lives, and so much more, then stay around for this episode with Kat, who I had a great time talking with about all of these subjects, and now I look forward to sharing our conversation with you. So without further ado, let's hop on over into my conversation with Kat and discuss all of this and so much more. Kat, welcome to Raising Consciousness. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. The sun's just come out, so the blessings are upon us.
Amazing, yeah. It's a bit overcast where I am at the moment, but I think I can see some blue sky maybe. So hopefully this afternoon it will brighten up a bit. But you are or reading for your work, spiritual transformation guide. What does that mean in practice?
In practice, it means that I reawaken people's divine aspects. It means that I reconnect them to their soul, not necessarily their purpose, but realizing that they're already living their purpose. So it's a process of peeling back the veils so people can find their true essence and peace and fulfillment in life.
Why is it important?
I think there's a yearning within all of us, really, to find our truth. To be able to, in modern society especially, be able to speak our truth, to find our voice, to feel that place of contentment, that fulfillment. I think so much, especially in modern society, there are so many of us that are so confused and baffled and led by the ideals and thoughts of others that I feel that all of humanity is in a space at the moment where it's trying to find its truth. And I believe the more of us as individuals that come to our own truth can raise that vibration and draw that energy to others. And I think that's the way that we will create the so-called new earth, or, you know, that peace that we all know that we're destined for in the bigger picture.
It's interesting you speak about purpose, because for so long in like my young adult life, you know, like late teens, early 20s, I was kind of trying to seek like my purpose, like the big question of like why I'm here, and then getting into content creation, podcasting, etc. There was a few years of like, okay, like finding my rhythm and stuff, you know, wanting to pay forward the things that I was learning and kind of feeling like I had a sense of purpose. But then most recently, you know, kind of feeling like, I don't want to use the words backwards, but that's, I guess, the word that best describes kind of this feeling that I've kind of been in, right? Of like just taking a step backwards and just actually questioning again of like, why am I here? What am I doing? And like going through that process again. And you alluded to it there in terms of um I like we don't necessarily need to like find our purpose, but in like the modern world, I feel so many of us feel like we do. And so what would you say to someone who is in that space of like not sure why they're here, or just trying to find that purpose or their purpose in life? Like what's the process you go through to help people to realize like they don't need to, or yeah, like let's spend some time kind of discovering that, because I think a lot of people can resonate with that, and I definitely know that I can, because I think a lot of my life has kind of been in that place of like actually trying to answer this question of why am I here?
Yeah. Well, it's the question, so I think in truth, everyone's asking it. Whether we have the courage to ask it of ourselves meaningfully is the difference to how we choose to live our lives. I think the idea that we're all already living our purpose almost leads back to this idea of peeling the veils back. It's more, I guess it would be more akin to, do you remember when you were at a party when you were a child and you used to play pass the parcel? And the gift that we are, our purpose, our truth, is already in the middle. It's always there. It's where we operate from. It's our truth. Yet when we come to ask these questions and we begin to look at it, it is like taking a step backwards, but it may seem that way to us, but it's simply peeling away another layer of the parcel to get closer to our gift. And eventually, we realize that we've been there all along. We are that gift in the middle. It's just that we've been wrapped in all these other layers that look very exciting. When we get that parcel, we're like, oh, it's my turn to take the paper off. We know that the truth may be inside, and that next layer of paper looks beautiful and exciting, and we're excited to play the game and to join in with this connection and communication with everyone. But the truth is that gift is always there. It's always been at the center of it. So when we ask ourselves these questions, there may be things, because we're in a very physically motivated reality where it's like, we want to be ripping off the layers of the paper, and we want to be at the gift, and we want to be holding it in our hand because that's what we believe. Sometimes to stop and, actually go through that performance of peeling everything back seems like we're taking a step backwards. It seems like we're stopping because we're so motivated by action. But a lot of the time, we have to kind of level out that frequency to kind of, and wait for the music to start again for us to find the next layer. So it's kind of that process. But, to really find your purpose in truth, we have to let ourselves speak and to know what it is that brings us joy. This whole process of life is here, I believe, anyway, to bring us joy, to bring us bliss, to bring us peace. When we look at the creation that we exist within, whether we believe that it's, source or God that created it, whether we even believe we're in a virtual reality process, this synchronistic universe and nature, the way that it works, that something would go to the lengths of creating something so incredible and miraculous for us to sit in the midst of it and suffer kind of seems ridiculous when we really think about it. So it's about really connecting to what it is that brings us joy. And most of the time, the question is, what is joy for me? Because that's not something that's encouraged. There's so much about this idea, even nowadays when we look about, setting up our own business and getting motivated and go, 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 and, for me, I meet a lot of people who are desperately trying to find their purpose, but they're so busy doing, they've forgotten how to be. And, it's being that brings us joy. Being able to connect to everything that we are, not what we've been taught to believe which we are, which is just, this separate little thing flying around on a rock through space, So, it's difficult because, in a modern world, we have to remember that most of us equate the idea of purpose to what we do as a job. And
Yeah,
actually,
I was
our
going to come on
purpose,
to that actually. Yeah, I was going
yeah,
to come on to that. Sorry for interrupting there. In terms of like, because I feel our purpose is so caught up as and like has a symbiotic relationship, with our career, right? And I feel like that's kind of a challenge that I face, is because like I haven't necessarily wanted to pursue like just one career or just do one thing, or and like there's like this pressure externally and also internally for myself of like, actually, what is my career, like what am I doing, right? And I think that this sometimes, in my experience, can cause a lot of the stress and anxiety that I kind of face, because I'm like, yeah, like because of that, I guess, relationship that so many of us believe is between our career and our purpose. So yeah, like talk to us about that. Is our purpose part of our career but bigger than it? What do you like? What have you kind of learned and teach others around this kind of relationship?
Well, I mean, I think the beautiful thing for me is I've had the benefit of working with people from all scales of this reality, from people who are very, very, very successful to people, I do a lot of humanitarian work, so to people that have been, in conflict. And as we would see, without an inability to have that level of purpose because the structure has collapsed, so to speak. And one of the things I always fall back on is the idea that, success is the side effect of self-love. When we can begin to love ourselves and nurture ourselves and find what it is that's our truth and our joy, it's almost like our purpose. Then it's like the final piece of the paper, with the parcel. Finally, we can find not only our gift, but how our gift can give back to us. So when we find our purpose, most of the time, yeah, okay, there's a role that's related with it, but it's about how we want to interact with everyone on that journey. So whatever career we choose, we have that way of orchestrating it. We can go, even if we're a manager, say, in a company, the way that we would treat our staff on a daily basis, whether we choose to be empathetic, whether we choose to, treat the staff that we work with respect and empathy, because that's what we wish to give into the world, or whether we wish to go out there and make sure everyone's doing 10 times as much work and are never allowed holidays and, we're micromanaging them and things like that. It's all about the way that we hold ourselves and honour ourselves within the work that we do out there. And I find that when people begin to really know who they are and push that into what they're doing and kind of behave that way in the 9 to 5, so to speak, it just becomes so much easier, and everything begins to open because they're not chasing. They're giving. And when we give, we receive, is one of the most incredible and joyous rules of nature. The more that we give, the more that we receive, and we're so used to believing that, however well we do in a work environment reflects on how good a person we are or how much we're worth and all of this. And it's really bandied around at the minute. There's a lot of pushing on this idea that, people live in lack, people are hanging on to it, and that there's, how much is my worth and things like this. But the truth is, it's about understanding our value.
So using yourself as an example, what is your gift, your purpose, and how does that show up in your life, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a similar story, I'm sure, to everyone. So I've got an incredible gift. I was born into a family of Chinese healers. My mum's Chinese. So I'm like 4th generation or maybe some more. The history gets a bit squiffy at some point. But I was born with the gift to be able to see, as a child, things I shouldn't have been able to see. So I was taught to hide that. Very much so. I said a lot of things as a young girl that I probably shouldn't have said, but I just didn't know because I was a child. And people were either quite fearful of it or very angry about it. So I learned to hide that gift. And even though I practice Chinese medicine, which is kind of seen as quite woo woo anyway, it's taken me a long time to become comfortable with really embracing what my true gift was. So I came out of university, and in a very much a work format. I was ready to heal the world. I'd got my degree certificate, and off I went thundering out there. And I found it very difficult to get to the point that I felt I could get to with people. So it was at that point I kind of came back to this work, because there was so much that I could do with acupuncture and herbs. There is so much that I can do with body work. And then it kind of came to the next level. And that's when my paper really got torn off. And so my purpose is to bring through that energy in people, to allow them to embrace who they truly are, to be able to hold space, to be able to be, as I call it, the kind of translator. The energy that runs through me is fortunately much more intelligent than I could ever imagine to be. And it meets everyone in their space. And it allows me to draw through messages for every individual in the moment, and to work through it with them, to allow them to slowly peel back those layers of paper. And I believe that by changing that, they go out there and give that gift to others. It's like a frequency. It's like a radio station. The more of us that are attuned to it, the louder it gets, and the more people can hear the music, the messages, whatever. So I see myself very much as a channel or a beacon of light, to be able to hold space and draw through the energies for, the ascension of humanity.
Do you think that all of our kind of purposes in some way is linked to helping others?
In some terms, yes. I mean, I'm very much in the kind of, I guess, maybe the other side of the thing, where I don't think you always, sometimes you can be not the best person, but still be a good person. It's about holding our boundaries. I'm very much not in the kind of everything has to be nicey, nice, peace, love, harmony, all of the time. It's about real life, and it's about understanding that we will be everything to everybody, whether we wish it or not. We all know, even with doing this and putting ourselves out there, there's still people that are going to, disagree with what we say. There's people that will be inspired. And part of our purpose allows us to move forward in that energy that we know, when it's our truth, what people need to hear and what people need to take from it will be exactly what it is. As much as I meet people that I think are difficult, and it's retrograde season at the moment, so it's the time for very wide and glaring reflections for us all. But it's whether we learn to take that step back, as you said, and see the truth in it and the lesson, or whether we choose to continue to try and change the external picture.
Going back to one thing you said earlier, when we were talking about joy, peace, bliss, etc., and the words like suffering, suffer came up. Do you think that is, in some stage of our life, whatever stage that is, do you think that suffering in some way isn't part of as part of the human experience, or do you think that the other, like joy and bliss is actually what it means to be human, or it depends what season you are in life? What's your kind of thoughts on that? Because there are some sectors that believe that like everything's like hard work, right, and you got to grind and hustle, etc. And then you have others that are maybe more on the other extreme. Personally, I believe I kind of tend to stay away from the extremes and like find balance in the middle. That at some point in our lives, there may be those challenges, but it's how you see them, is how you approach them that ultimately that matters. So I'm interested in, like, from your perspective on how you see it, and maybe that also links with kind of your work within Chinese philosophy as well, that I kind of want to dive into afterwards. But yeah, where do you stand on like suffering and that topic?
Well, yes, suffering is a good subject. I'm kind of the belief in some senses that if every day was a good day, you would probably know nothing. I think that there may, and hopefully I think there's a lot of people working towards a time where peace, bliss and joy will be the kind of modus operandi. But I believe at present that we are within a different energy form and that there is still suffering. We only need to look into the world really outside of ourselves to see, even in the bigger picture. And the bigger the picture, the bigger the reflection of humanity's, standing and where we're truly at. Suffering for me was a lesson that I learned, I guess, as a younger woman, in the sense that I went to work on a lot of humanitarian projects. I worked with people that have been in concentration camps. So for me, when we talk about the idea of suffering, those guys have pretty much got all the T-shirts. And I went out there again. I was still in this young age where I was in my I'm off to heal the world kind of phase. And it was really, really interesting for me because of the belief that I brought with me about how to treat people and how to work with people that I believed had suffered to such an extent. What I found there, much as you're saying, was the way that people behaved and how they dealt with life after suffering, really, And what I found there was courage, joy, bliss, fulfilment, contentment that I would have never, ever wished to see. Not wished to see, but believed I could have seen there. Because here were individuals who had all of the material aspects of comfort taken away from them and had come from such a traumatic situation that they had been given the gift of being able to choose what life was after that experience. And so it was really, really interesting because people's sense of humour was very, very, very interesting, as you can imagine. But just the way that they dealt with life and the simple things that brought them joy were all based around experience. Yes, it was good to be able to bring the food to the table, but what was important was to be there with loved ones, to laugh, to share, to have the freedom to see friends, to sit with them, to be able to do all of that. The one thing everyone kept saying is, I am not a victim. And everyone seemed to come out of there fighting for themselves, for their not just their life, but for their truth, and there was a different kind of peace and energy and confidence and kind of wisdom, and I'm still fascinated to work with people like that because, we go out there and, we think we're doing all this great work, but there's not a single person that I have met through that who hasn't at some point touched a part of me or said something to me in passing that has just completely left of centre and I'm off somewhere else. So, suffering, I think, it's how you view it. There are obviously extremities of it and it's all relative. But I think, if we can get to a point where we can see it in hindsight, it can be our greatest teacher.
Do you think that's something that a lot of Western cultures kind of mistake, is suffering with, let's just say, going through a challenge, and that actually when you get perspective on going to, I don't know, a third world country or a country where a disaster has been, etc., you actually see suffering for what it is. And actually most of us in our day-to-day lives, we aren't quote unquote suffering, we're facing challenges, and that's not to undermine those difficult moments, etc., but it's maybe not suffering, or do you just think like there's different levels of that word, I guess?
Yeah, I think there's different levels. As I said, it's all relative to the individual. I'm very much in the belief that we were all incarnated with our own kind of soul's truth and path already, like a little bit stamped upon us, although there is free will and choice. But so each of us, has to negate the level of suffering that we need to find our truth, to find our answers, to find our purpose. And so, it's to the individual, because we see even here that there are those that unfortunately get to the point where they feel the need to take their own life. There are people here, we have food banks now, we have all kinds of stuff where there are signs of poverty, there are inequalities. So suffering is it's all relative to the individual, because truly none of us knows what happens in here, as much as we may try to explain it. I could spend my whole life trying to explain this exact moment to you, but I'd never really get anywhere near it. And that's part of understanding our process as well, about allowing others to have their experience. I think sometimes we get so caught in the comparison that when we're truly suffering, and I think all of us have had moments where it feels inescapable, regardless of the situation in the external world, that energy and that pressure and that feeling, of suffocation, of coming in, so to speak, is, I feel, the same for all of us.
Do you think like that's, if we kind of talk from a big picture, like society kind of perspective, do you think that's the quote unquote default state of society at the moment, is suffering and like going through a transition, going through a process of, I guess in tune with the name of the podcast, raising consciousness, of like raising that vibration, raising that consciousness to a state of being in joy and bliss. And that's what I'm saying, like, even once in those vibrations and states, we won't have challenges, but do you think like we're going through that process of from our default state at the moment is like one of suffering to kind of more higher vibrations?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, gosh, it's an interesting world out there at the moment. And I think part of that the suffering is also part of the letting go. Sometimes when we move through these kind of vibrations, when we move through these energies and things like that, it's a shedding, it's a letting go. And we've been pretty good as a human race at suffering for quite some time now. We've got a good handle on it, and it pedals out quite a lot, and we see even nowadays, people are very into the story of suffering, and people that have overcome the suffering, and that we like to watch it. It's the narrative in so many, great odysseys and stories, about how people have overcome things. And for generations, there's been, it's been the hustle, it's been the grind, it's I think a story where someone thinks, oh, I'm suffering a bit, and then overcomes it immediately due to a new vision or frequency. It's probably not going to be a bestseller. It's and even to the sense that we really champion people, but for me, yes, it's worth celebrating people that have overcome suffering, but I think it's also really important to understand the journey, and to understand that we can change that. There's a great saying in Buddhism from the Buddha, that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So that's really what it comes down to, that life will continue to happen. None of us, fortunately, although I'm sure there's a few out there who wouldn't mind, can stop life in its tracks. But it's how we choose to approach it. It's how we choose to walk on our journey. There are many, many paths. I was just talking to someone the other day, and it's like, when we look at life, it's like the valleys and the mountains. We can choose to hang on to the side of the cliff by our fingertips, fearful that we may fall to our death at any moment, or we can choose to meander through the valleys, and wander alongside the river and stop to smell the flowers and, dip our feet in the water. That's our choice in life, and I believe that more and more people are becoming aware of that path and wanting to take it, rather than what is advertised, which I think is the cliff's edge.
Do you think that we can get stuck in suffering for some kind of like payoff that we get? So whether it's being celebrated in some way for continuing to overcome challenges and moments of suffering, or whether it's the attention that we get from being in suffering, do you think like sometimes we stay in that state and don't let go of that for some kind of like payoff, which like sometimes and oftentimes is unconscious kind of behavior, right? So it's like bringing the consciousness to that, but would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, there was one of my teachers a long time ago, when I was doing more of the healing and stuff, and he said that when you go into practice, you have to remember that some people will come to see you to prove that you can do nothing to help them. And it's not for you as the healer to become upset by that, because that was what you needed to do in that instance. You were that person, that energy, that being to them. And so, incredulous as I found it when I started my journey, there are some people, even in modern society, they've become so, attached to not just suffering, but, a disease or something like that, because it becomes who they are. It becomes their story. You have people, who haven't worked for years, who are fearful of going back to work. People are worried that no one will care for them anymore if they don't need the help and attention. And in even a psychological sense, we can get to that point, that we become so reliant on the crux of our story, that we are here to suffer, to bear the cross, so to speak, for ourselves and for others, and even to the point where it comes to the wounded healer, which I think for all of us as healers is the one thing we don't wish to admit. But in truth, I think we all have to at some point, is that the reason most of us are drawn to this work is because truly the person that needs healing in the first instance is ourselves. And until we've been on our journey and until we've healed ourselves, we cannot help others, because we know not where they suffer or how they suffer. So it is difficult in that sense, because it's a part of people's journeys, but so many people get caught in that thing. It's that saying that people are their own worst enemy. And I've seen it time and time again, and it used to really frustrate me. Like, I used to be like, oh, what's wrong with these people? Why don't they want to get better? It took me years to learn to settle and realize that was their path, and that when that moment came and when they were ready to truly heal, they would do. And what they needed would be there in that moment for.
So 2 kind of final points I want to explore here is, one, what would your advice be, or just like recommendation to people who, let's say they have a friend or a family member, or they are a healer, maybe they've got a client who is in this state, right? So they are stuck in this state of suffering, and they it seems like they don't want to help themselves. So, because that can be a difficult kind of situation, especially with people who their identity might be like a helper, right? So they really want to help others. And another point you mentioned there of like when people are ready, they will um, start to, I guess, help themselves. Do you think that there is, what's the word I want to use here? Hope for everyone. So what I mean by that is like using that example again. Let's say we have a friend or a family member, and seemingly it's maybe it's been going on for years, like 10, 15 years, they don't seem to help themselves. Is there hope for that person at some point, or is some people like whatever happens, you just can't help them in a way, if that makes sense? So I'm just trying to understand of kind of get this idea or understanding of like if people can be helped, if they can, and if people are or if there are some people as well that are like never going to be ready for some reason, which is quite, I guess, pessimistic. And I'm actually like to view myself as an optimist, which is why I'm kind of asking this question, right? Because I don't like the idea that there's nothing that we can ever do to help someone, or someone is just going to go through life and just not help themselves and then like just die, right? Like and get to the end of their life and have all these regrets and everything. So a bit of a loaded question now, I'm probably not articulating myself correctly, but hopefully you kind of can read between the lines of what I'm trying to get to and ask here.
Yeah, no, I mean, it can be, it sounds like a kind of a rather dark place, doesn't it? That, people may struggle their entire life. I think for me, one of the important things when I am presented with someone in such a way where either I find it very difficult to get to a point where I might be able to help them, or I feel that they may not be in a position at the present moment to help themselves, is to understand why they're on my journey. Because if I can begin to understand why they're in my realm, beyond this idea of I have to help them, which is, whether we like it or not, a kind of ego thing. When we let go of that and we can begin to see the true reflection of why that person is in our life at that moment, then we can maybe see the way that we can help them. Because if we can begin to address those issues within ourselves, if we're meeting lots of people where we think, why aren't these people helping themselves? Why aren't these people helping themselves? At some point, we have to look in the mirror and say, why am I surrounded by people that won't help themselves? And why is this frustrating me? And why is it triggering me? Where is it that I can get to a space where I can simply support them on their journey? Where perhaps this is the greatest thing that I can do for them at this moment, is to allow them to simply be themselves, to not try and control, to not direct, to not move forward, to simply let them be and allow them to be in this way. Because even for the greatest of us, sometimes, we're walking down that path and we're continuing and, we all have those moments where we just think, oh, it's that, and when we look back on it, we can't be like, why was I doing that for so long? Like, what on earth? How could I not see that? And when we can understand that it is that way for so many, a lot of the time this stuff is real blindsider, and, the beauty of people like me is fortunately we're kind of there to go like, oh, if you perhaps have a look over here and hold that space and support and bring you through those situations with grace and ease, and to educate you in a way that you can begin to sort of draw back from those situations and approach everything from that greater perspective where it's not a personal thing. If we can't help someone, it's not our failure. It may just not be the right time for them. But if we can show up in a way that's genuine, if we can allow them to be themselves and give them that space to do that and see what the teaching is, we never know that in the teaching that we learn, we may give them exactly what they need. They may be, as difficult as they may seem, they may be the angel in the situation, not us. They may be the one that leads us closer to the prophecy. So
Mm.
it's always interesting when we're in those situations to see why we feel so uncomfortable, because we think there's only one way out, which is, oh, I've got to help them. I've got to do this for them, and a lot of the time, for me, I've found with clients that, they've wandered off somewhere and they've gone, oh, it's brilliant. I went and did this, or I went and did that. And all of a sudden I understood everything you said, and it all made sense, and it was incredible. And it was like 5 years afterwards. I could never have known that, but if I'd have continued to insist, that this is the way forward, they would have never found their true path. Yet everything I gifted to them in that moment was in fact valuable. And when the time came for them to embrace it, it was an even greater gift than I thought it could be.
Yeah, lots of insights there. Just like looking at my own life and experience. It's I think for me, like this topic is most challenging when it's and maybe people can relate to this, including yourself. Is like when it's the people like you really care about, and let's say you're seeing them going through challenges and suffering. And so I'll pick an example from my life. So over the last 18 months, got a lot more into thinking about health, and like that's become my single most important thing, health, and my single most driver and value, and everything. And learn so much that when, let's just say, a friend or a family member is suffering with a particular health issue, I feel like I now have more of the tools to kind of help them with it. So I would pay that I'd pay that forward. I would share what I've learned, and then when they kind of continue to, I think the challenge I have is that when they continue to quote unquote complain about it, and not necessarily do anything about it, and I've kind of shared with them this potential solution, that is when sometimes I can feel like, a bit, whether it's I guess like frustrated, and like actually like what else can I do? And actually, is that a little bit of like an ego thing on my part, one, and two, I guess the ego thing would be, one, thinking that like what I've shared with them is, I mean, I wouldn't say that what I'm sharing with them I think is gospel. Like, everything that I share with them is things that I've learned from experts like yourself, Kat, right? Or, experts I listen to on kind of podcasts, and multiple, so it's not like I would just get one kind of idea, and, like I test different stuff. I listen to multiple different things, people, and read books, etc., and then kind of find a consensus kind of around that idea. And so, I'm kind of wanting to, I guess my point is like, is that, let's say we have something, we pay it forward, we share it, and wanting them to kind of do something, is that on our part ego driven? I feel like it comes from an authentic, good place. And even if, no, what's the question I want to ask? So when we see other people suffering as well, is that, and us wanting to help them, is that on some level like an ego-driven thing as well, because we don't like to see people suffering, if that makes sense?
I don't think it's not necessarily the kind of ego that we talk about. It's not.
Yeah,
the ego,
but like
it gets
a different type.
a lot of bad thing. So it's not a negative thing to want to care and to nurture the people that we love that are around us. To be the opposite would be very. I've got things to do. I don't know why you're being ill. I have time for this.
Yeah.
So it's understandable, but at the same time, it's about embodying that part of being, what's the word? An inspiration for others, by carrying on these actions. And we never know, as we said, what's going on inside the head of other people, that what they are watching may be an inspiration, and there may be little things that they pick up. And, all it's going to take is that one decision to say, yeah, I'm doing this. It's only going to take 10 seconds to say, do you know what? Luke seems like he's doing really well. Perhaps there is something in this. Perhaps I can take this on. Perhaps I am allowed to be okay. Perhaps I don't have to suffer. Perhaps this isn't my story. Perhaps there's something else for me. And, to be a tireless inspiration is an incredible gift to someone. To be there, to show them how it's done, to do something for yourself. Sounds as though that's the greatest inspiration, because many people that I meet that are in that position, it's the same. I can give them all the information. I work with clients, we have, because we do body, mind and soul. So, I give them acupressure discs for their hands. So they have like full kind of body acupuncture every night. We do a full diagnosis. They have to put some stickers on their hands before they go to bed and take them off in the morning. And people still, I just don't find the time to do it. So it's this ability to give to the self, to love the self. And, when people are in that space, it doesn't matter the words, they fall on deaf ears. But we can be an inspiration. We can use that knowledge, and we can be that person that is constantly around them doing stuff, and being that energy within them, I'm always moving, always changing. We can be that inspiration. And whether they choose to take action, is primarily their life, but we can still love them through it, and we can still love the fact that they find it difficult, to care for themselves when we think they're incredible, and it's so hard. But sometimes it's about not necessarily giving people the knowledge and the information, but just reminding them how incredible they are and how much they mean to you. Sometimes it's about almost, back to the beginning, about reminding people of their purpose to you and what they mean to you and how they've been an inspiration and how important it is for them to be here for you, to have that conversation. Because truly, that's what people need to inspire them to care for themselves, is to see that others recognise their greatness.
Very insightful. Your work is based on, and forgive me if I'm wrong here, but Chinese philosophy, Chinese medicine. For those who don't know what that is, what is Chinese medicine? And how does it differ from the healthcare system that probably most people who are listening to this here in the kind of Western civilizations, countries, etc., are used to?
Okay, so Chinese medicine is a very, very ancient system of healing. I was raised in a family of 5-element practitioners. So 5-element is the super old school stuff. I also practice TCM, which is traditional Chinese medicine, which is strangely enough the modern version of Chinese medicine. So it's based on basically, quantum physics, whether you like it or not. It's, the idea of yin and yang. I think everyone's seen the very famous Tai Chi, which is the symbol of the two halves with the two dots in it. So, we've worked in a system of duality for a very, very long time. Definitely, I would say circa 3,000 to 5,000 years, but some people would say more. It's not my area of speciality. So the idea with Chinese medicine is we come from a symptomological idea. So we believe in, there's the three treasures, the Jing Qi Shen, which is kind of part of the foundation. So Jing is like the physical body, Shen is the mind, and Qi is universal life force energy. So we believe that by harmonizing all of these aspects within the human experience, we can reach that space, the line in between the black and the white in the circle. And that space in between, that path, is the Tao. So the Tao, or the Taoist or something, that's the universal flow. And at this point, originally the Taiji was two fish swimming around. So it's this idea of this little flow of water. And when we're in this universal flow, when we harmonize and balance everything within our experience, we can live the greatest life of flow and ease. If you read some of the ancient texts, people could do some pretty miraculous things. I've been kind of playing with qi and doing, I guess, what people would call magic in the West for many, many years. So yeah, there are some incredible things that you can learn to do. But it's, all about harmonizing that process. So we use meridians in the body, which are energy pathways, kind of like the circulation system or the respiratory system. And it's kind of like the motherboard, really, when you look at it from a computer sense. It's how we send the signals around the body. And the major difference from Western medicine is that we work from the root and not the symptom. So in Eastern medicine, we very much look to deal with, you may have, depression, you may have heart palpitations, you may find yourself very stuck in life. These are all symptoms of the same pattern. And what we look for is not to give something to alleviate the depression. What we look for is the reason that occurred in the first place, so that we can work from a different level, and that we can reharmonize the body. And when we are out of the dis-ease, so to speak, we can live this life of harmony and, well-being. It's preventative. And obviously it works with problems when people know us for headaches and shoulder pain, knee pain, but it's a full medical system. And I think for me, the greatest thing about Eastern medicine is that we have a much greater spectrum of health. But I think people are beginning to walk in the West now. So I always giggle that, in a kind of very rudimentary sense in the West, you have this kind of very short line where there's kind of there's kind of well, and then there's ill, and then there's like death. And as long as you're not in the kind of ill towards death section and you're in the well bit, everything's okay. And that is as good as life is going to get. But the beauty with Eastern medicine and most of the ancient traditions is that is literally, the Western model is the tip of the iceberg. And then you've got the rest of it, I'll take my hand off screen, it's going about 3/4 of a metre there, where we come from what is classed as, teetering on the verge of illness in the West. Then we have well-being. Then we have, a very good physical, psychological, and then we have all the way the spiritual well-being really kicks in. And then right at the other end is enlightenment or nirvana or the Shangri-La, however we wish to call it. So the beauty of that for me is it's that part of the journey I'm interested in. And as yet, I'm still here, obviously. I haven't quite found the end of it. But to me, that's what really, really drives me through life. And it's, my belief that it's, somewhere down the other end of that spectrum nearer the enlightenment, and, that we can all attain as human beings. And, there's so much more to just being well in Eastern medicine. That I think that's the real gift in it.
Kat, so I find this, what I'm about to say, very perplexing, I guess, that Eastern medicine, Chinese, obviously we're talking about specifically Chinese medicine here, gets to the root cause. And so that makes a lot of sense to me, why is these practices, this medicine, this ancient wisdom, one, frowned upon, and two, is labeled as alternative medicine, where for in my mind, and I hate to use words like should, but it quote unquote should be the primary medicine kind of system, or what we go to first, because it gets to the root cause. So like, why would we not want to get to the root cause of things? Why would we want to, like, waste so much of our precious time and, and energy, and even like money in some cases, going around the houses, just treating symptoms and not get to the root cause? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Yet these practices are frowned upon. They are viewed as the alternative to the Western system, which, let's be honest, like, is failing and doesn't work. Now, I feel that there's a place, but the place for Western medicine, I think, is more about like the emergency care. So like a few months ago, I had to have an emergency operation, right? And like, that was a game changer. That was like really important, and I got seen like really quickly, etc. It wasn't like life or death or anything, but it was emergency procedure that I needed to have, and the system was great for that. But a lot of like the chronic health conditions that we face, I think the Western system kind of fails, and then Eastern medicine is frowned upon, as I've been saying. So I've always been fascinated of like, and a little bit through the podcast, wanting to get to the reason of like why ultimately, and we'd love to get your thoughts on that.
So, I mean, to be honest, I think it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I think, it's probably no great surprise that I think a lot of it is financially driven. Even when we look at the NHS,
of course.
Even when we look at the NHS in this country, if you go back to the original kind of foundations of the NHS, they also ran a project called the Peckham experiment, which was based much more around social prescription. But they decided at the time that it would be more financially viable to create the NHS as it came to us and as it is today. And kind of what's interesting is that although originally that was the plan, it's kind of now it's unaffordable even to the system itself. And I think that's what has brought a lot of people in the West back to more traditional preventative medicine systems. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, integration is the way forward. And I'm the same as you. I always say, if I get hit by a bus, I don't want to go to an acupuncturist, however good they are, and so everything has its time and place. But I also think, there's a lot of fear in the unknown when it comes to Eastern medicine. I've had obviously my fair share of people it's one of the few jobs where people will quite happily tell you to your face that they think you're a charlatan and you're this and you're a that, and you think, lovely, most of the time, when I do ask those people, what they do know about Chinese medicine, I can kind of write it on the back of a postage stamp. So I'm kind of, I'm not really at that point with it anymore. But, the other thing we have to remember, really is that, when we look at these ancient systems of medicine, they are thousands of years old. As far as I'm concerned, when we look at Eastern medicine, it's so sophisticated, it's unreal. Someone can come to you with knee pain. I can literally stick 3 magnets on a plaster, and it goes, and off they toddle, and I see them a week later and it's, 40% reduced. But, when Western medicine is perhaps 5,000-10,000 years old, perhaps they will be as sophisticated, and we will meet in the middle. But, it's very, very emperor's new clothes, I think, with Western medicine. And I think people, even in the system themselves, would admit that they're still finding things out as they go along. There is still many syndromes and many things that they're learning to deal with. And, I'm sure at some point it will catch up with that. But, I think it's the language that's used is very difficult. And as I said, quantum physics, whether they like it or not, they've kind of fallen down a wormhole there, because, you know, they're beginning to prove, even with their own parameters and limitations in the West, that everything the ancients have been saying for millennia is in fact true, you know. And yeah, again, it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know. It's almost like we're coming back to that age again, you know, when we look at all the, you know, the theories of motivation, when we look at flow mechanics, when we look at all of this kind of stuff, you know, this process, you know, is beginning to unfold itself. And that's where I think the real beauty of integration is actually, you know, even when we look at sciences, you know, we have quantum mathematics, we have fractal chemistry, you know, quantum physics, you know, and all of this. And it is only now, obviously, the maths is beginning to change, that they're, you know, the only system that hasn't shifted is biology. You know, and, you know, I think unfortunately, you know, due to powers that are much greater than you or I, you know, in this physical world, it will be a grapple and it will be a while. But, you know, people are starting to vote with their feet because people want to feel better, you know, and that's the real difference, you know, that waking up and feeling good in your body and feeling like, yeah, I can do this. You know, and that's almost down to that idea of, you know, how we tackle suffering, you know, because if we're teetering on the edge of disease all the time, you know, physically, and we're kept in that position, we are suffering in a certain sense. So why would it be that we meet everything else in life as a process of suffering? You know, and I think people are beginning to realize that, you know, physically, the better they feel, you know, then psychologically they can begin to tackle things. And now, you know, we're in this arena where people are beginning to tackle things from a spiritual process. You know, the way that energy works, you know, the issue begins in the spiritual or the quantum realm. You know, it then, if it's not dealt with or resolved or harmonized, balanced, whatever you want to call it, it comes down and becomes a psychological issue. And if it's not dealt with at the psychological issue, it becomes a physical issue. You know, and that's why very much in Chinese medicine, you know, you'll find that, you know, you'll go and see a Chinese medicine doctor and they'll start asking you all kinds of random questions about how do you feel about this, and, you know, how tidy is your house, and blah, 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 because we understand that every expression of life is an expression of the being.
Do you think it's frowned upon also because that's what we've, in a way, like been told through like the media and like culture, and that it kind of requires us to, I mean, you alluded to it there, like wake up and actually realize like what we're doing isn't necessarily working, right? Like conditions like obesity, etc., are only on the rise, right? So I always then my focus, and one of my principles, I guess, would say is like, what have humans been doing the longest, right? And so when you ask that question, in my experience, you tend to come back to a lot of these ancient practices. But yeah, I'm just trying to understand like how we got to this point of where like we aren't focused on the root cause, whereby we label these ancient practices as the woo-woo, as the thing that's different, as the thing like, oh, you know, be careful with that. Yet those are the things that we've been doing for the longest, right? And it's almost like we've forgotten them, and it's almost like we've therefore forgotten what it means to be human in some way. And one of my goals, like through the podcast, every I'm doing is to remember, you know, to remind ourselves of that and to kind of get back to that. So yeah, like what's your thoughts on that? Do you think it's the social conditioning that's happened that has led us to this point? And you alluded to it there, that you're seeing a change, and is that from like the people that you're working with, or are you seeing like a bigger change in the world as well?
I think I think it's to the people I'm working with, but I see a bigger change in the world as well. You know, it's I've been doing this stuff a long time now. You know, I'm touching my 5th decade. So, you know, you know, it was very weird and I was very strange. You and it's become more and more normalized. As I said, people used to literally just laugh in my face when I told them what I did. It wasn't even that it was, pseudoscience or dangerous. It was a joke, it's like, okay, so you grew some tough skin. And now I get people, who I would have never imagined walking through the doors, who are like, right, sort this out, and after 2 or 3 sessions, they're like, so how does all this stuff work then, Kat? And it's a journey of self-discovery. I think the reason that we've got here, I think really, I believe in a world where everything came from love. And I think even Western medicine, came from the idea where they wanted to stop people suffering. And I think it's just got its knickers in a twist, so to speak, because, even when we look at, some of the oldest, stuff that used to go, as the system was being created, even we look back at that now, and it looks horrific, especially when we look at the mental health and, what people were incarcerated for and that kind of area, it's unforgivable, some of the things that we see, it's Hollywood movie, a lot of it, it's blockbuster stuff. So it's not that it's out there and in people's faces, but I think we've just come to this point because, people thought they could do something better. People wanted something better. I think there was a big change in the system, where everything became more uniform and everything became the same, and that was about amassing things and ownership and control, and a very kind of masculine energy in that sense, and hoarding things, wanting more, which is an illness in itself in Chinese medicine. But, it came from that wanting to amass, and the difficulty with Eastern medicine and with all of those systems is it's different for everyone that comes to see you.
Personalized, isn't it?
Yeah, it's personalized. It's different for everybody. So you can't, there's certain, like, even with herbs and stuff, there's formulas that you can buy pre-made and things like that. But, if you want the really, really, it has to be tweaked. So you've not got that ability to mass market, and I think it's also, it just came, whether we like it or not, with the kind of empirical view on life. That we're here now, this is what we're doing, this is how it's going. And there was a lot of denigration of indigenous cultures, a lot of brutal violence, a lot of, even the knowledge that we know today, is nothing. A lot of it was destroyed and has been systematically destroyed throughout civilization. Knowledge is truly power. So I think there's, so much more than simply, healthcare that's been involved with the exchange and, the evolving knowledge and education around healthcare. I think it's in such a difficult position now, because so many people are starting to see through it. You can, people are into supplements, like avocados, you can get an avocado for love nor money when I was growing up. And obviously with the Chinese family, there was like one Chinese supermarket and that, like, everybody went there, and now you see all these different cultures, all these different foods, people, are going to things like doing exercise, going to the gym, people are doing meditation, none of this was, available. And especially for guys, my goodness, it's like, when I was growing up, a young man like yourself to be where you're at in your journey is almost an epiphany. It would have been like, wow, who is this guy? And that's what's really appealing to me, is that there's so many young men like yourself that are embracing this, because this is how we bring this mass balance in society. But as I said, I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at the moment, and that it's coming round to it. And health, whether we like it or not, is a journey of self-discovery, and that's why it's so individualized, because I can eat 10 avocado pears and feel terrible, and you can eat nothing but avocado pears for 3 weeks and feel the best you've ever felt. It's, even in the ancients, they say, one man's poison is another's elixir, and that's probably the deep truth, when it comes to the finances anyway, of why the system is where it's at.
Wow. One final question for you, but before I do so, and I don't watch the news, and although I was guilty of a little bit like headline not reading but listening. So I just passed my living room and the TV was on and something, and there was some kind of article around, or they were talking about how this person went to a quote unquote alternative medicine expert or something and got really ill and like passed away from it, and they were like slating the ancient I'm not even sure if it was Chinese medicine or another system, because you obviously have a few like Ayurveda, etc. And I kind of found that interesting because they were obviously slating it, but I was like, well, think of all the things that go wrong every single day within the NHS or Western system, right? And that, okay, sometimes they come on the news, but
I
we
think I've
still
lost you.
quote unquote, everyone still goes to the doctor, right? Everyone still, the system is still the system, right? Like it's still practiced, people still go to the hospital and the doctor. And I just kind of found that kind of where kind of we are in some quarters, like where we are, if like something goes wrong with ancient wisdom, ancient practices, ancient medicine, and we're really quick to like jump on it and state it and say, people like be, and there's like this call it dangerous, and do your research, etc. But then the current system is the current system, and okay, it might be on the news, but we don't blink an eyelid type of thing. We've kind of accepted, like, in a way, that's what it is. And I just found that to be I don't know, it touched a nerve in some way. I'm not sure if you have anything to kind of say on that. My actual question was, when it comes to the ancient practices, the ancient medicine, Chinese medicine in particular, obviously your focus, where do people start with that? Like, what's their starting point that they can take away from our conversation today?
Well, I think the thing is, when it comes to, alternative, in inverted commas, medicine, is to do your research. I know that probably 99% of my clients come through word of mouth. That's the best way. I mean, honestly, from the position that I've been in, and I also work with Ayurvedic practitioners, what people don't know is that there have been people like myself and Ayurvedic practitioners who have, for the past 15 to 20 years, been petitioning government to be asked to create a fully government organised registered body and a qualification that ensures everybody is qualified to the same level. So I've got degrees in the stuff. I sat and did anatomy and physiology, differential diagnosis, pathophysiology with all the doctors and nurses. I did what's called an exchange degree, because I know that no one's ever going to walk into my clinic space and say, Kat, I've got spleen damp, or, my liver cheese all over the place. So I have to understand and be able to speak their language as well, so it's an important part of it. So the thing to do is to always check in, and make sure that you get it right, because, even in the Western healthcare system, there are good doctors, and then, there are bad, and they end up on the news as well, so, that's the system. I'd always say to people to check in, and ask around if it's something that you're interested in, and get recommendations. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't cost you any money. Most people now on social media will have testimonials on their website and things like that. But if you can get someone that's word of mouth, it's worth its weight in gold, isn't it? They've had a good experience. But if people really want to start, the thing to do is, get in touch with someone, and have a conversation with them and have a consultation and let them talk you through where you're at and your process. I find most of the people, when I work with them or I have a consultation or something, by the end of it, they're like, oh my God, I feel so much better already, because the way that I speak to them and how I explain how we're going to work together, what we're going to do, whether it be physical healing, whether it be online work, they know that I've understood them by the end of it. And I think that's one of the biggest difficulties. But if you really, Chinese medicine, start at the yin yang process. If you want to go for a theoretical thing, if you want to go for an education thing, there's some great stuff online now. But if you want to really start with the foundations of Chinese medicine, then the place to start is, looking at yin yang, and looking at the meridian systems and looking at how the body works. There's so much free stuff out there, and if it feels right, it feels right, but yeah, always word of mouth.
Kat, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. Learned so much myself. That's why I love to have these types of conversations, deepen my own learning and knowledge that then in some way I can pay forward to others. And yeah, just thank you for your time. I've had a blast, and hopefully that you have too. Before we wrap up, where can people go if they want to keep in touch and learn more about you and your work and everything that you've got going
on? So I'm on all the social media platforms. I'm Catuniverse on Insta and Facebook. I'm just Catu on LinkedIn. I've got a website that, fingers crossed, will be finished. Ploughing away on that by the time this comes out, which is cat-chew.com, which has got all my stuff out. And I'm starting doing lots of free kind of channeling stuff and wisdom series at the end of September. So there'll be opportunities to sign up to that. And obviously you can talk to me about Chinese medicine. Just send me a message and we'll sort out a time on there. So yeah, that's where I am.
Kat, thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
My absolute pleasure. Take care.
So there you have it, my conversation with Cat Chew on everything related to purpose, human suffering, spirituality, Chinese medicine, and so much more. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation as much as I enjoyed actually having the conversation and learnt a ton that you can apply to your day-to-day life. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing to the show if you got value from this episode. Then do check out those links in the show notes for everything that we have mentioned, including Kat's links if you want to stay in touch with her. Once again, thank you for listening or watching to Raising Consciousness, whatever platform that you are joining us on. And I look forward to the next episode really, really soon. Take care.